Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Natural Science. This week we're going to do revision for term 1, and next week we'll start with revision for term 2. So the first chapter for the revision that we're doing is photosynthesis and respiration. I'm just going to recap it because you already have been taught it and you know. And basically for term 2, you need to do term 1 revision because if they do have an exam, or questions when you return back to school, they normally do test term 1 and term 2 work. And at the end of the year, they test all terms work. Okay, so at the end of the lesson, you should know more about photosynthesis and respiration. Okay, and we do a quick recap of what we did on Friday. So a circuit is a system for transferring electrical energy. We learned that for a circuit to function, there must be a complete, unbroken pathway for the electrons to flow. A source of energy, which are the cells, and the load. The load is the light bulb and the resistor, or you could say the resistor. We use symbols to represent components of an electric circuit so that everyone can interpret the diagrams. And this is universal symbols across the world. So a resistor is a component of a circuit which resists the movement of the electrons through it. Okay. And an electric circuit can heat a resistance wire. This heating effect is used in many everyday appliances, such as kettles and irons. An electric current, it causes a magnetic field around the wires, and this magnetic effect is used as electromagnets. I must warn you to please keep your cameras off and remember the rules that we have set on previously. Cameras off. We're chatting only about content-specific information, and you will raise your hands if you have a question. So I'll continue. An electric current can cause a chemical reaction in solutions, and this is called electrolysis. And it is also used to electroplate objects. And remember, we spoke about electroplating, where I told you that it is better to electroplate iron, for example, because it prevents certain objects from rusting, especially objects that are going to be around water. Okay, so now we're going to learn about why do we need to learn about photosynthesis and respiration. How is it important for us? Basically, energy is needed to sustain life, and without it, nothing would be able to live on Earth. Our most important source of Earth is basically the sun. So in this information that I am presenting, and you're listening to this lesson, you're using energy to do that, and you sustain the 7 life processes. Okay, all energy sustains life. I do apologize for the problem. There was a slight difficulty, but we can continue now. So energy sustains life, and all life on Earth depends on the energy to sustain the 7 life processes. The interaction and the interdependence in an ecosystem are driven by the need to sustain energy and basically to sustain life. The sun is an important source providing this energy in the form of light and heat. So there are basically 7 life processes. Does anybody know what the 7 life processes are? You can raise your hand. Yes, Levi.
The 7 life processes are moving.
I can hear you. Good morning.
Oh, good morning.
How are you?
Fine, thanks. And how are you?
I'm good, thanks. What's the 7 life processes?
The 7 life processes are moving, reproducing, sensing. Oh, sorry, that's my baby brother coming in. Sorry.
It's fine.
Okay. Wait. Okay, can you please wait? I'll tell you when they went out. Okay. Okay. Okay, I'm ready.
Okay.
The 7 life processes are moving, reproducing, sensitivity, um, feeding. Yeah.
Okay.
Um, yeah.
Okay, that's good. That's very good for trying. Well done. So we have the life processes. It is movement, respiration, sensitivity, growth, reproduction, excretion, and nutrition. And a very cool way to remember it is Mrs. Gren, Gren, Mrs. Gren. So in it, this is a mnemonic that you can use to learn. So in your test, so when they ask you 7 life processes, just write Mrs. Gren. So in case you forget, then you'll know movement, respiration, sensitivity, growth, reproduction, excretion, nutrition. Can I ask my host to unmute one participant that had their hands raised? Hi, I think it's Ratabele. You have a question?
No, ma'am, I'm sorry, there's a mistake.
Okay, no problem. Right. So we know that the form of energy that the sun produces is called radiant energy. Although the sun provides us with both light and warmth, the warmth is the heat because the sun heats the earth's surface. Plants use this light energy from the sun to photosynthesize. Most organisms cannot directly use the energy from the sun to perform the 7 life processes. For example, a reptile can lie on the sun to warm from the heat of the sun, but this doesn't necessarily mean that it provides the animal with energy. So we only get energy from the food that we eat, and neither does it provide it to reproduce or to excrete. Now, except for a few flea slugs, plants are the only organisms on Earth that can absorb the sun's radiant energy. And it converts this energy into food. And this food basically feeds all living organisms. So it's very important to take care of our plants because this is what is giving us food. It's also giving animals food. So plant indirectly because the animals eat the plants. So plants use carbon dioxide from the air and it uses water from the soil and the energy from the sun. So this is a series of chemical reactions that work together. The carbon dioxide, the water, and the energy from the sun, they all work together in a chemical reaction to produce glucose, which is food. And this is the process of called photosynthesis. Now, oxygen gas is basically a byproduct. It's actually a product that is produced, but it's just a byproduct from the process of photosynthesis. The main reason to photosynthesize is basically to produce food. food to feed the plant, so the plant can grow, and eventually food to feed you and other living organisms. So let's see. We have radiant. How do we convert radiant energy to chemical potential energy? You can ask yourself, now what is potential energy? We did discuss it in previous lessons. So do you remember that we spoke about energy? Cameras off, please. Remember that? Remember that we spoke about in previous lessons about energy, movement energy. So movement energy is kinetic energy, and you also get stored energy. Now, potential energy is basically stored energy, energy that you're not using at the moment. So what are some of the things that have kinetic energy and some of the things that would have potential energy? So kinetic energy is when you're moving, and like potential energy is like the energy stored in a battery. Now, all living organisms can use energy in the form of chemical potential energy for their life processes. Now, this is the energy that is stored in the food that organisms eat. Plants are able to capture the radiant energy from the sun and transfer it to chemical potential or stored energy for other organisms to use. And they do this through the process of photosynthesis. All organisms release the stored potential energy from the sun that they eat to support their life processes. And this is called respiration. So, um, respiration, you must also know, is different from breathing. Okay, so photosynthesis takes place in small structures called chloroplasts, which are inside the cells of the leaves and the stems in a green plant. And inside the chloroplast, you get a pigment called chlorophyll. So if you look at the picture here on the right hand side, so you will see this leaf, and this leaf is basically under a microscope, and you can see that it has these little veins that go through it. Okay, and these are green pigments, and also all around here you will find chlorophyll. This is what gives the plants the green color. So photosynthesis is a process in which chlorophyll molecules absorb the radiant energy from the sun, and it transfers it into chemical potential energy. So in the test, if they ask you, discuss the process of photosynthesis, you're going to say it is the chlorophyll molecules on a plant or on the leaves absorb the radiant energy from the sun, and it transfers it into chemical potential energy. And you must also remember that the only function of the chlorophyll is to trap the sun's energy. Now, chlorophyll does not produce or is it or used during photosynthesis. It is there or mainly to trap the sun's energy. You don't Chlorophyll is not a result of photosynthesis. Okay, you have the chloroplasts. They are a type of organisms or organelles found in plant cells, and the cells is a basic unit of a living thing. Please remember, cameras off. Right, so chloroplasts are only present in plants. However, some sea slugs have learned to absorb the chloroplast from green algae, which they eat and go into their bodies, and they can actually photosynthesize themselves. So chloroplasts are very important in the process of photosynthesis. So photosynthesis has other requirements besides energy from the sun. Okay, so what do you think these are? So if you look at the diagram here on the one with the plant on your left-hand side, and let's see how we can summarize photosynthesis. So the plants use the sun's energy. So look at the diagram. You have the sun using the plants using the sun's energy in a series of chemical reactions. So it reacts with basically your carbon dioxide and the water from the soil, and it goes into the roots of the plant, and it goes up, and the so okay, and the plants grow, and it gives off oxygen. So we say plants use radiant energy from the sun in a series of chemical reactions to change carbon dioxide from the air. So it absorbs the carbon dioxide and water from the soil into glucose. So it makes glucose. So on these green leaves, you get glucose, and it also releases oxygen. Okay, so if you look at the diagram here at the bottom on the left-hand side, who can tell me what the requirements are to what the chemical requirements are, and then what the products you get for photosynthesis. So you have here photosynthesis. You need a chemical reaction. What's the chemical reaction? What does it need to enable the chemical reaction to get certain products? I did tell you when I was explaining it to you now. To look at the diagram for a clue. Does anybody want to try? Okay, nobody. Yes, Levi?
The
Levi.
energy requirement is the light energy
And
or sunlight,
okay,
and
the sun.
also carbon dioxide, if I'm mistaken.
Okay, so we have sunlight.
Yes,
Okay, and also what? It uses carbon dioxide and
chlorophyll.
okay,
That's
so
the
it would
pigment.
use carbon dioxide and water. Okay, so the sun's energy mixes with the carbon dioxide and the water, and the chemical reaction is basically the chlorophyll and the sunlight. So
Chlorophyll and
basically,
light.
we have water and the carbon dioxide mixes with chlorophyll that's in the plant and the sunlight. Then it photosynthesizes and you get a byproduct. What would be the byproduct?
Um, Either glucose or oxygen.
Okay, very good. That's very good, Levi. Thank you so much. So your
Thank you.
byproducts are your glucose and your oxygen. So that's what it gives it off with. So can you see how you can learn with diagrams? So we're taking basically the carbon dioxide and the water, we're mixing it with the light energy and the chlorophyll to get glucose and oxygen. Okay. Process of photosynthesis can be represented in an equation. So you're going to put your cameras off. Okay, so it's carbon dioxide plus water. It mixes with chlorophyll and sunlight. So these are the reactants, carbon dioxide and water. So the reaction process is chlorophyll and sunlight, and you get products. The products are glucose and oxygen. So you can use the things that we learned in term two, and you can apply it, and it makes a bit more sense for you now. So what happens when the glucose that plants produce during photosynthesis? So the glucose basically goes into storage, and we can use it later. The glucose that a plant produces when we photosynthesize is the food of the plant. The plant usually use this glucose directly, and they release the energy during its own respiration, and it can store the glucose or it can convert it into other chemical compounds. Okay, so glucose is soluble in water. This means that the glucose can dissolve in water. So it's useful to the plant, as it means that it can transport the glucose to water to where it is needed elsewhere in the plant. However, in order to store large amounts of glucose, plants need to convert it into compounds which are insoluble in water. Therefore, the plant converts glucose into starch, which is insoluble in water. I believe I had a hand raised. If anybody has a question, you can raise your hand and my host will unmute you. So basically, we're saying that glucose is soluble in water. So it means that glucose can dissolve in the water. And it's useful to the plant because it means that you can transport the glucose to where it is needed. Okay. Yes, Lucidi?
Hello, ma'am.
Hi, how are you?
I'm fine, and you, ma'am?
Good, thanks. You have a question?
Yes, ma'am. I just have a question on the equation of photosynthesis. Under that
Okay.
chlorophyll and sunlight, shouldn't it be the nutrients of the soil?
The nutrients of the soil, yes. You're quite right. You do it. You can add nutrients of the soil as well because it does use nutrients from the soil. So you can add it as well. But it also would be the sunlight, nutrients from the soil, and the chlorophyll because they all work together, and then they would use. You would get the products glucose and oxygen. Well done for that, Lucidi. It's
Thank you,
brilliant.
ma'am.
Thank
Yes, ma'am.
you so much. Okay. So now, why do you think that the plant might need to store some glucose? So there's a reason why it stores the glucose. Plants basically change the glucose into starch and to cellulose and other chemical compounds to enable processes such as growth and reproduction. So basically, it stores the glucose and it converts it into starch. So it allows the plant to grow and to reproduce. Now, in addition to the starch, plants also convert glucose into cellulose. Cellulose is used to transport and strengthen plants. Animals do not have cellulose for support. So instead, animals have something else to provide support to protect their body. Basically, they have their skin and their fur that protects their body. Now, glucose is also converted into other chemical compounds that enable processes in the plant, such as reproduction and growth. Now, plants use sugars, which is the glucose, as a basic molecule from which to make hundreds of other compounds, such as proteins, oils, vitamins, colorful pigments in flowers, strong taste chemicals, like you get the hot chili plants, sweet tasting nectar like honey, and then you get fragrances that you can make perfume with. Now, respiration we have we now seen that how plants produce food during photosynthesis. Now the energy from the food needs to be used by plants and by all the other animals who eat these plants. In fact, all organisms need to break down in order to release some kind of chemical potential energy for their life processes. So let's find out what happens. So our bodies basically need energy to move and to do work. Where we get our energy from? The energy is obtained from the food that we eat and from the organisms that we also eat. If you think back to the work to when you did in previous grades in energy and change about fuel and energy, you remember that fuels such as wood, coal, and oil, they all contain chemical potential energy. When this fuel is burnt in the presence of oxygen, the chemical potential energy is transferred into light and heat energy. Okay, I just want to do 2 slides and then I'll come to you, Levi. So in the same way, the glucose from the food that you eat is combined with oxygen in a series of chemical reactions to release the energy. So the glucose is broken down and the energy is released. Now this energy is then used to drive all the other processes in your body. And this process is called respiration. So we define respiration in all living organisms as a process by which our energy is released from glucose in a series of chemical reactions. Now, breathing is different. Breathing is basically taking in oxygen and giving out carbon dioxide, but respiration is a process by which energy is released from glucose in a series of chemical reactions. So it's basically telling you that you need to eat, and from your food that you eat, you energy is released through a series of chemical reactions to make you do all your other life processes, which is yeah, Mrs. Gren. Okay, so you to summarize, we have respiration. It contains food energy, which is stored as potential energy. And this energy can be released from food by chemical reactions. And this is the process of respiration. So respiration is the process by which energy is released from food in a series of chemical reactions. So you get glucose, you get oxygen, and then it releases carbon dioxide, water, and energy. Now, respiration does not produce energy. Okay, now energy would be the byproduct. It produces water and carbon dioxide as byproducts as well. Now, during photosynthesis in plants, oxygen is produced as a byproduct. Okay, now in photosynthesis, the main thing that we wanted to do was to produce food, but the byproduct was oxygen, which is what we basically need to survive. And the main product is wanted in the process in photosynthesis was to produce food. It was a process in glucose. So what are the byproducts of respiration? So we can say it would be carbon dioxide is what we give off. Okay, so the carbon dioxide that is produced by organisms in our body during respiration, it needs to be removed. So in humans, we do this by breathing out carbon dioxide in air. And we learn more about that in grade 9. Can my host unmute one of the participants that has their hands raised? Hi.
Ma'am, it's me.
Hi, Levi.
Isn't it you said that during respiration that glucose and oxygen is that glucose and oxygen is turned to energy, carbon dioxide, and water, isn't it?
Okay, so the
Ma'am,
glucose, yes.
and also there's also those are the requirements, like glucose and oxygen are the requirements of photosynthesis, and the other one is the requirements for the products. Ma'am, can I say it in a proper way? I'm just stuttering. Okay.
No, it's okay.
Glucose. Okay.
Why don't you do this? Write it down and email it to me, and then I'll look at it. Okay. You can do it as
Ma'am, please say
homework.
it. Ma'am, please say it.
Okay, say it quickly.
It's just that the requirements for respiration are glucose and oxygen, and the product for respiration are energy, carbon dioxide, and water.
Okay, well done. Okay,
Thank
that's
you.
very good. You're welcome. So now don't confuse breathing with respiration. Breathing is the act of inhaling and exhaling, as I said before, and respiration is the metabolic processes of oxygen that releases energy, which is carbon dioxide. Okay, I think one other person wanted to has their hands raised. Hi. Okay, so basically you have homework. I'm going to load this up for you. It should be up by tomorrow. You have this concept map. You can look on the site and you can download this concept map. And it's what we discussed today. And you have things to fill in here, in these blank spaces. Okay? And you can use this as well. After you fill in the blank spaces, you can use this to summarize the content of what we learned today. So when you're studying for exam purposes. Okay, so I will email it to our guys, technical department later today, and then it will be up on the website by tomorrow, and you can download this and you can do this as your homework. I will try and do it this afternoon, so you can get it by tonight. Okay, and you can do this as your homework and then keep it. Keep it so you can study through it for your exams that would be coming up. Okay, or whatever test that you're going to do. So in summary, the need for energy drives the interactions and interdependence in an ecosystem. The sun provides energy in the earth in the form of radiant energy and heat energy. Photosynthesis is the process whereby green plants use carbon dioxide from the air and water from the soil and radiant energy from the sun in a series of chemical reactions to produce glucose, which is food, and oxygen. Plants are able to photosynthesize because they contain chlorophyll, which is a green pigment that can capture light energy from the sun. And then plants change the glucose that they produce into starch that can be stored more easily. Okay. And then we have that plants also produce cellulose fibers that give plants strength and to support and are more important in our digestive systems as roughage. I think one person wanted to ask me a question. If my host is able to unmute you, he would. Otherwise, if he can't, then there's a little technical difficulty, and we do apologize for that. Okay, so the food that a plant produces is used by animals when they eat the plant and by other animals that eat them. The foods contain chemical potential energy that needs to be released from the food. Now, respiration is the process in all living organisms by which energy is released from glucose in a series of chemical reactions. And respiration uses oxygen while carbon dioxide and water are given off, and they are called byproducts. Okay, so you can think of the process of how you eat. So you can look at this website here. I'll put it back on. Okay, I seem to have a little difficulty there. My screen went off. So all the information from here was derived from Ciovela.com, and you can look at this YouTube address, and it will explain why leaves are green. So it's YouTube, small a, capital Q, capital Y, small PRA, number 4, small a, capital U, small f. And it's nice to look at videos because they help you learn better. So you can join me tomorrow. We're going to talk about ecology and the interaction and independence with the environment. So that's basically what ecology is, the interaction and how it depends, all the organisms depend on each other and interact with each other. If you want to contact me, my email address is ahaffea@gmail.com. And it's been an absolute pleasure teaching you today. I hope you benefited from this lesson. I do apologize for the technical difficulty earlier on, and have a lovely day. Goodbye, everybody. See you tomorrow.